The night was supposed to be quiet, just another long day ending in silence. But when a powerful Arab executive walked into his mansion past midnight, exhausted from endless meetings and deals, he stumbled upon a scene that froze his heart. In the golden glow of the chandelier, he saw his elegant blonde wife, the woman the world envied him for, screaming and kicking his frail godmother. The woman who had raised him like her own was lying on the marble floor, crying in pain, her hands covering her face from the blows. What he chose to do in that moment didn't just shock everyone who later heard about it. It revealed a side of him no one ever imagined, a decision that would change his life, his family, and his legacy forever. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. This way, you'll never miss stories that touch the heart, open your eyes, and remind you that true strength lies not in wealth or power, but in the choices we make when no one expects us to. Zayd al-Hakim had built an empire out of nothing. By the age of 45, the Arab executive was known not only for his oil and shipping ventures but also for his spotless reputation as a man of honor. To his colleagues, he was the embodiment of control. To the world, he was untouchable. But that night, as the heavy iron gates of his villa creaked open, he felt the weight of exhaustion pressing harder than ever. He longed for silence, for a moment to breathe after another day of ruthless negotiations. The mansion, perched on the edge of Dubai's coastline, usually greeted him with peace, the soft sound of waves crashing against the rocks, the distant hum of the city. But as he entered the marble foyer, a sharp noise cut through the air, a cry, desperate and muffled. His steps froze. At first, he thought his mind was playing tricks on him. It wouldn't be the first time stress had conjured illusions. But then it came again, a whimper, fragile and trembling, echoing off the polished walls. His chest tightened. Slowly, he set his briefcase down, the echo of its clasp snapping shut ringing louder than it should have. The cries led him to the grand living room. There, under the brilliant golden chandelier, an image shattered every piece of composure he had cultivated for decades. His wife, Elena, the elegant blonde who graced magazine covers, the woman admired for her beauty and charm, was standing over his godmother, Samira. Samira was no ordinary woman in his life. She had taken him in as a boy when his parents were gone, raising him with discipline and kindness. She was the reason he had learned to respect women, to balance power with compassion. And now, that same woman was on the floor, her frail body curled into itself, hands trembling as she tried to shield herself from Elena's furious kicks. "Elena!" Zayd's voice thundered, more from shock than rage. His tone filled the vast room like a storm breaking over calm seas. Elena froze for a second, her heels still raised above Samira's ribs. When she turned, her face was twisted, not with guilt, but with indignation. "She doesn't belong here, Zayd," she spat, her voice dripping with venom. "She poisons you against me. She has always tried to come between us." Zayd's breath came shallow, each word from his wife cutting deeper than the last. His eyes darted to Samira, who was gasping, trying to rise but failing. The sight tore at his soul. The woman who had taught him to walk, who had sung him to sleep when grief consumed his childhood, was being humiliated in his own house. "Elena, step away," he said, his voice low now, controlled, but his fists clenched at his sides betrayed the storm raging inside him. But Elena didn't move. Instead, she smirked. "Finally, you're here to see it. To see how she manipulates you. You think she's an angel, but she whispers lies about me. She makes you doubt me. I won't let her destroy what we have." Zayd stepped forward, his towering frame casting a shadow between them. He knelt beside Samira, his hands trembling as he touched her shoulder. "Mama Samira," he whispered, the same name he had called her since boyhood. Her tear-filled eyes met his, and in them he saw not just pain, but betrayal. She had trusted him to protect her, even from his own household. For the first time in his life, Zayd felt powerless. He was a man who could silence boardrooms with a single glance, who could bend markets with his signature. Yet here, in his own home, his world was collapsing, and it was collapsing because of the woman he had chosen to share it with. "Elena," he said again, standing tall now, his voice steadier, colder. You have dishonored this house. You have dishonored me. Her expression faltered for just a second, a flicker of fear crossing her face. But she quickly masked it with defiance. So, what will you do? Choose her over me? An old woman who clings to you like a shadow? Zaid's heart pounded. His mind raced through every memory, the nights Samira had prayed for his success, the sacrifices she made so he could study, the unwavering love she had given him when the world was cruel. Compared to that, Elena's beauty, her luxury, her presence in society's spotlight suddenly seemed like glitter on broken glass. His decision was forming, but he knew it would break everything open. The room seemed to shrink around them, the silence so heavy it was suffocating. Even the waves outside seemed to pause, as if the universe itself was waiting for his next move. Finally, Zaid turned fully toward Elena, his voice sharp and final. If you touch her again, you will never set foot in this house. Elena's jaw dropped. You would throw me out for her? For her, he said, his voice cracking with raw emotion, and for the man I refuse to stop being. Samira reached for his hand, her frail fingers squeezing lightly. Ya Habibi, she whispered, her voice trembling. Don't lose yourself for anyone. Zaid looked down at her, his heart torn. He knew this was just the beginning of a battle, between love and loyalty, between his reputation and his truth. The question now wasn't what he had seen, but what he would do next. And as Elena's icy stare met his, Zaid realized the night had only just begun. The silence that followed Zaid's words was suffocating. Elena stood rigid, her fists clenched at her sides, her chest rising and falling with anger. Her usual poise, the elegance that charmed guests at galas and boardroom dinners, was shattered. In its place was a raw, unmasked fury. You don't see it, do you? She hissed, her voice trembling not with fear but with rage. She's been poisoning you against me since the day we married. Every look, every word, she's made you doubt me. I won't live in her shadows, Zaid. Her words pierced the air like shards of glass. Zaid remained unmoved, his tall frame standing like a wall between Elena and the frail figure still curled on the marble floor. His godmother's quiet sobs echoed through the room, each one deepening the cut of betrayal he felt. Elena, enough, he said, his voice sharp, controlled, but his hands were trembling. This is not the woman I married. This is not the woman I believed in. Elena let out a bitter laugh, one that carried more pain than humor. No, it's exactly who I've always been. You just never bothered to look. Samira tried to sit up, her hands gripping the edge of a sofa for support. Zaid rushed to help her, ignoring the sting of Elena's words. He gently placed a pillow behind her back, his hand brushing her hair out of her face. She whispered, Don't fight because of me, Habibi. But Zaid shook his head. This is not your fault. This house is built on respect, and tonight that respect was shattered. Elena's eyes flickered with something that resembled desperation, though she tried to bury it beneath anger. She took a step closer, her heels clicking against the marble like gunshots. And what of me, Zaid? Where do I stand in your empire? A trophy wife to smile at your side while you pour your soul into everyone else but me? Do you even know what it feels like to be invisible in your own home? The accusation landed heavy. For the first time, Zaid hesitated. He remembered the countless nights he'd returned home late, buried in contracts and negotiations. He remembered Elena sitting at the long dining table alone, glass of wine in hand, her eyes cold. Had he ignored her? Had he been so consumed with his empire that he failed to see the loneliness in his own home? But no amount of loneliness could justify cruelty. Not this. Not the sight of Samira broken on the floor. You were never invisible, Elena, he said, his voice softer now but no less firm. You chose to turn your pain into violence. That is something I cannot forgive. Her lips parted, but no words came. The fire in her eyes faltered, replaced by something more fragile, fear. Not fear of losing wealth or status, but fear of losing him. Zaid, she whispered, almost pleading. A sudden knock at the door cut through the tension. All three of them turned their heads. The sound was heavy, insistent. Zaid's body stiffened. At this hour, no one came unannounced. The butler appeared nervously in the doorway, his hands wringing together. "Sir," he said, glancing uneasily between Elena and Samira, "there are two men outside. They say they need to speak with you urgently. It is about a financial matter." Zaid narrowed his eyes. Financial matters never came to his doorstep. They belonged in offices, in private meetings, in high-rise towers where power was negotiated, not demanded at midnight. "Who are they?" Zaid asked. "They claim to represent an investor from Riyadh. But they look different. Aggressive." Elena's face paled. She quickly turned away, her shoulders stiff. Zaid noticed it, the way her hands fidgeted, the sudden avoidance of his gaze. "What do you know about this, Elena?" he demanded. She flinched. "Nothing," she said too quickly. "I don't know anything." Samira's weak voice broke through. "She knows, Zaid. Look at her." Elena spun around, her face flushing with anger. "Don't you dare accuse me again, old woman. I've had enough of your poison." Zaid's patience snapped. "Enough." His voice boomed, making even the butler flinch. He stepped closer to Elena, his eyes burning with a mix of sorrow and fury. "Did you bring them here? Did you betray my house?" Elena's silence spoke louder than words. For the first time, Zaid felt his empire teeter. Betrayal at home, threats at his door, it was more than coincidence. His wife's defiance, her desperation, now had a darker meaning. "Keep Samira safe," he ordered the butler, his voice low and commanding. "Do not let anyone near her." Then he turned back to Elena. "If I find out you had a hand in this, you will lose more than this house. You will lose the right to call yourself my wife." Her eyes welled, but she blinked the tears away, clinging to her pride. "And if I did? If I was pushed to it because you never saw me? Would that make me unforgivable too?" Zaid stared at her, his chest heaving. "You were not pushed. You chose." Another knock thundered at the door, louder this time, shaking the frame. Zaid's decision loomed like a blade above his head. Protect his empire from external threats, or protect his soul from the rot inside his own home. Both battles were demanding his attention, and both carried the weight of destruction. Samira whispered weakly from the sofa, "Ya Habibi, be careful. The enemy outside is nothing compared to the enemy inside." Zaid closed his eyes for a moment, his heart heavy. When he opened them, his decision was clear. He would face both enemies, but first he had to expose the truth. He looked at Elena one last time. "When I open that door, the world will know who you really are." The sound of the lock clicking echoed like a gunshot. And as Zaid prepared to confront the men waiting outside, his marriage, his empire, and his very identity stood on the edge of collapse. The heavy oak doors groaned as Zaid pulled them open. The salty air from the sea rushed inside, carrying with it the tension of two figures waiting outside. They were not dressed like businessmen. Their suits were wrinkled, their ties askew, and their eyes carried the sharpness of men who knew intimidation better than negotiation. One of them, tall and broad-shouldered with a scar running down his cheek, stepped forward. "Mr. Hakim," he said, his voice deep and gravelly. "We need a word." Zaid didn't move from the doorway. His towering frame filled the entrance like a barrier. "At midnight? In my home? Who sent you?" The second man, lean with quick eyes, smirked. "Let's just say a friend in Riyadh. He's invested heavily in your ventures. He doesn't like being ignored." Zaid's jaw tightened. He had hundreds of investors across the Gulf, men who trusted him to turn their wealth into empires. But none of them sent thugs to his doorstep. This was different. This was personal. "You will schedule a meeting during business hours," Zaid said firmly. "You don't walk into my house demanding answers." The scarred man chuckled darkly. "Your house is not untouchable, Hakim. Neither are you." His eyes flicked past Zaid's shoulder, into the living room where Elena stood frozen near the staircase. For the briefest second, Zaid saw recognition flash in her eyes. And then he knew. "Elena," he said slowly, his voice low but sharp as a blade. "You brought them here." Her lips parted, but no words came. She gripped the railing, her knuckles white. The lean man leaned against the doorframe casually. "She only told us what we already suspected." That your empire is built on fragile loyalties. That without the right protection, it could all fall apart. Samira's voice, frail but steady, rose from the sofa inside. Don't listen, Zaid. They're snakes. And snakes always bite the hand that feeds them. The scarred man scowled. The old woman should stay silent. She doesn't know what's at stake. Zaid's rage flared, but he forced himself to stay calm. A leader who lost control was already defeated. He took one step forward, his presence commanding, his voice like iron. If you ever threaten her again, you won't leave this city alive. The men exchanged glances. They hadn't expected him to face them head-on. Enough games, Zaid continued. What do you want? The lean man's smirk returned. Your signature. On a transfer of assets. 20% of your shipping company handed over to our client. In return, your family stays safe. Refuse and... He let the threat hang in the night air. Behind him, the waves crashed harder against the rocks, as if the sea itself recoiled at the audacity. Zaid's mind raced. 20% of his shipping company meant billions. It wasn't just money, it was power, influence, the arteries of his empire. To give it up would be to hand over control. And Elena had opened the door to it. His gaze shifted to her, standing pale and trembling at the staircase. Why? He demanded. Why betray everything? Tears welled in her eyes, but her pride held her tongue. Finally, she whispered, because you never chose me. You chose her. Her eyes flicked toward Samira. Zaid. You were hers first, and I was just decoration. The confession cut deep, but it did not excuse the knife she had driven into his back. You turned your jealousy into treason, Zaid said coldly. And for that you will answer. The scarred man stepped forward again. Enough talking. You have until tomorrow night. Sign the papers or we come back. And next time, we don't just knock. With that, they turned and walked into the shadows, their car disappearing into the night. Zaid closed the doors with a heavy thud, his chest heaving. The weight of what had just happened pressed down on him. His empire was under siege from the outside, and his home had been poisoned from within. Samira coughed weakly, her hand clutching his sleeve. Ya Habibi, do not give them what they want. Once you start giving, they will never stop. Zaid nodded slowly, his mind already turning like the gears of a machine. I will not give them a single grain of sand, Mama. But I must find out who their client is. Someone powerful enough to come after me like this. Someone desperate. He turned toward Elena. She stood pale, tears streaking her face, but her defiance remained. You will tell me everything, he said, his voice like steel. Names. Meetings. Every word you exchanged with them. Elena shook her head. They'll kill me. Zaid's laugh was bitter. You should be more afraid of losing me than of losing them. For the first time, Elena crumbled. She collapsed into the chair behind her, covering her face with her hands. The image of the glamorous wife admired by all was gone. What remained was a broken woman, consumed by envy and fear. Zaid turned away. He could not look at her now. His mind was already moving ahead, planning, preparing. He would summon his most trusted advisors in the morning, men who owed him not just their loyalty but their lives. If this was war, he would fight it with every ounce of cunning and power he possessed. But in that moment, as he looked back at Samira trembling on the sofa, he realized that the greatest battle was not with faceless men in the shadows. It was here in his home. And if he could not protect it, then all his wealth, all his power, meant nothing. Zaid clenched his fists, his eyes burning with resolve. Tomorrow, the war begins. The sun rose over Dubai with a cruel brightness that belied the storm brewing inside Zaid al-Hakim's mansion. For the first time in years, he had not slept. He had spent the night pacing the study, his mind replaying every word from the scarred man, every tremble in Elena's voice, every tear on Samira's face. By dawn, his decision was clear: he would not give in. But defiance alone was not enough. He needed a plan, and he needed allies. Zaid's study was a monument to his rise, floor-to-ceiling shelves lined with law books, market analyses, and family heirlooms. The centerpiece was a large mahogany desk, upon which lay the contracts of his empire. Now, those papers felt like targets. He picked up his phone and dialed a number only a handful of people knew. Within an hour, 2 men arrived: Karim, his chief financial strategist, and Omar, his security head, a former special forces officer with a reputation for loyalty as hard as iron. They found Zaid standing by the window, the light of morning outlining his broad frame. "You came quickly," he said. His voice was calm, but his eyes betrayed exhaustion. "You said urgent," Karim replied, adjusting his glasses nervously. "What happened?" Zaid turned slowly. "We have enemies at our door. Men who believe fear will do what negotiation could not. They demand 20% of our shipping company. If I refuse, they threaten my family." Omar's fists clenched. "Names?" "They didn't give any," Zaid said. "But they claim to represent a friend in Riyadh. I want to know who this friend is, and how deep his claws go." Omar nodded once. "I'll find them." His voice carried the certainty of a soldier preparing for battle. But Karim's face paled. "Zaid, if they are who I think they are, this is bigger than business. These are not investors. These are sharks. They fund wars, they buy politicians. They don't ask, they take." Zaid's lips tightened. "Then let them try. My empire was built stone by stone, sacrifice by sacrifice. They will not steal it overnight." Before Karim could reply, the door to the study creaked open. Elena stepped inside. Her face was pale, her hair tied back hastily, as if she hadn't slept either. "I need to speak," she whispered. Omar's eyes narrowed, but Zaid raised a hand. "Let her." She hesitated at the threshold, then stepped closer. "The men who came last night, they're connected to Nasser al-Hadid." The name hung in the room like smoke. Karim gasped softly. Omar's jaw tightened. Nasser al-Hadid, once a partner, now a rival. He was a billionaire with roots as deep in Riyadh as Zaid's were in Dubai, a man known for building alliances through intimidation. Years ago, Zaid had walked away from a deal with him, refusing to compromise his ethics. Nasser had not forgiven him. "You spoke with him?" Zaid asked, his tone icy. Elena's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. He approached me at a gala 2 months ago. He said he knew what it felt like to be unseen. He made promises. He said if I helped him, I could finally step out of Samira's shadow. I thought it was harmless. I didn't know he would send men to our home." Zaid's chest burned with fury, but beneath it was something more painful. Betrayal cut twice when it came from those closest. "Harmless," he thundered. "You let a snake into our house. You gave him the key to our weakness." Elena flinched, her tears spilling. "I was foolish. But I didn't want them to hurt you." Her words rang hollow, and yet part of him saw the truth. Her weakness had been used against her. Nasser knew where to strike. Samira's frail voice drifted in from the hallway. "Zaid, do not waste anger on her. Anger belongs to the man who sent wolves to your door." Elena turned toward the sound, her face crumpling. "I never meant to hurt you," she whispered. Samira's eyes, though tired, burned with clarity. "You chose envy. That choice is yours to carry." The weight of her words fell heavy. Elena covered her face and fled the room. Omar stepped forward. "This changes things. If it's Nasser, we need to move fast. He won't stop until he takes something from you." Zaid nodded slowly. "Then we won't wait for him to strike again. We go to him." Karim's eyes widened. "To Riyadh?" "Zaid, that's walking into the lion's den." "Better I walk in," Zaid replied, his voice resolute, "than let him crawl further into my house." Omar's lips curved into the faintest of grim smiles. "Then we prepare." The rest of the morning was consumed with strategy. Omar laid out security plans, arranging for guards to shadow Samira's every step. Karim began tracing financial threads, searching for shell companies tied to Nasser. Zaid listened, contributed, but his mind remained fixed on the image of those men at his door. As dusk fell, he stood once more by the window. The city stretched before him, glittering, alive, ruthless. His empire. His responsibility. Samira entered quietly, leaning on her cane. She looked at him for a long moment before speaking. Ya Habibi, you carry the weight of nations on your shoulders. But do not forget, the strongest empire begins in the heart. If your heart is poisoned, everything else will fall. Zayd turned, his voice low. And what if my heart is already broken? Her eyes softened. Then you build again. Stronger. Wiser. With courage. For the first time all day, he allowed himself a deep breath. He placed a hand over hers, their bond unshaken by betrayal, unbroken by fear. Outside, the call to prayer echoed across the city, filling the night with solemn beauty. Zayd closed his eyes and whispered, "Tomorrow I face Nasser. And tomorrow he will learn what it means to threaten my house." But even as he spoke, he knew the coming battle would demand more than power. It would demand sacrifice. And the question was, what, or who, was he willing to sacrifice to save everything he had built? The Riyadh night shimmered with wealth and menace as Zayd al-Hakim's convoy rolled to a halt outside Nasser al-Hadid's estate. The palace loomed like a predator in the dark, its gates guarded by men with rifles, its windows glowing like watchful eyes. Omar sat beside him in silence, his jaw clenched, while Karim muttered prayers under his breath. Zayd, however, was calm. He had walked into boardrooms filled with sharks before. Tonight was no different, except the sharks carried guns. They were escorted into a cavernous hall, its marble floors polished to a mirror's shine, its chandeliers glittering with blood money. At the far end, on a golden chair that resembled a throne, sat Nasser al-Hadid. He rose slowly, his broad frame draped in a tailored suit, his smile as sharp as a blade. "Zayd al-Hakim," Nasser drawled, spreading his arms. "At last, the lion leaves his den. Welcome to Riyadh." Zayd did not bow, did not smile. "You send men to my house like thieves in the night. You threaten the woman who raised me. And you think I will welcome you as a friend?" Nasser chuckled. "Your pride still blinds you. I offered partnership years ago. You insulted me. Did you think there would be no price?" Omar stepped forward, but Zayd raised a hand to stop him. "So this is revenge. You want 20% of my shipping empire? Take it to court. Not to my doorstep." Nasser's smile vanished. His eyes hardened like steel. "Courts are for the weak. I take what I want. And you, Zayd, have built an empire too perfect. It's time someone broke it." The words echoed like a gavel. For a moment, silence filled the hall. Then Zayd stepped forward, his shadow stretching long across the marble. "You may threaten me, Nasser. You may even try to buy my wife with promises of power. But you forget one thing. My empire is not built on fear. It is built on loyalty. And loyalty cannot be bought, cannot be stolen, and cannot be broken by men like you." At the mention of Elena, Nasser's smirk returned. "Ah, your lovely wife. So beautiful, so lonely. She told me more than she intended, Zayd. She told me where you were weakest. And that is why I will win." Zayd's fists clenched. The betrayal burned fresh, but he forced himself to remain composed. "You mistake loneliness for loyalty. She may have whispered to you, but tonight I end this whispering." Omar's hand rested lightly on his shoulder, a silent reminder, control the rage or lose the war. Nasser raised a glass of wine, his arrogance on full display. "Then tell me, Zayd, what will you do? Sign over your empire, or bury your godmother when we take her life next?" The words sliced through the air. Karim gasped. Omar's eyes flashed with fury. But Zayd simply stepped closer, his voice calm, deadly calm. "You will not touch her. Because if you do, every ally you think you have in Riyadh will abandon you. They may fear you, Nasser, but they fear losing their wealth more. And I will show them that aligning with you means ruin. Tomorrow, I reveal every fraudulent deal you've hidden. Every shell company you used. Your empire will collapse before you can lay a finger on my family." For the first time, Nasser's confident mask faltered. His glass trembled ever so slightly. "You wouldn't dare," he said. Zayd's voice was steel. "Try me." The hall grew still. Even the guards shifted uneasily, sensing the shift in power. Nasser's smirk returned, but weaker this time, forced. "You've made powerful enemies tonight. Zayd turned, his coat swirling behind him. I've made enemies my whole life. And I've never bowed to any of them. Omar and Karim followed as Zayd strode toward the doors. The guards did not move to stop him. Fear, quiet but certain, rippled through the room. Outside, the night air was sharp and cold. Omar finally spoke. You think he will back down? Zayd looked up at the Riyadh sky, its stars hidden behind city lights. He already has. He just doesn't know it yet. The convoy sped back toward Dubai. When Zayd finally stepped through his own gates, dawn was breaking over the sea. Samira sat in the garden, wrapped in a shawl, her frail body silhouetted by the rising sun. She looked up as he approached, her eyes soft but questioning. Did you face him? She asked. Zayd knelt beside her, taking her hands. Yes. And I chose you over everything else. I chose loyalty. I chose the man you raised me to be. Tears welled in her eyes, and for the first time in days, Zayd allowed himself to breathe freely. Elena appeared at the edge of the garden, her face pale, her eyes swollen from crying. She did not speak, but the shame in her gaze was louder than words. Zayd looked at her for a long moment, then turned back to Samira. I cannot undo what has been broken, he said softly. But I can rebuild what matters. The waves crashed gently against the rocks below, as if applauding the choice. For all his billions, for all his power, Zayd finally understood the truth. An empire without loyalty was sand, ready to collapse. But a heart anchored in love, in courage, in sacrifice, that was unshakable. And in that quiet morning, as the sun rose higher, Zayd al-Hakim felt stronger than he ever had before.